Hello and welcome to Crossover Kings, the series where we'll pick out a character and analyze their history of success in crossover battles against other fictional characters and determine how well they measure up. For our first episode, we're starting big with one of the most iconic characters in fictional history and one of the two most famous giant monsters to not originate from ancient mythology, Godzilla. Debuting in the 1954 Japanese kaiju disaster borderline horror film, Gojira, Godzilla is an icon of cinema and one of the poster boys for big monsters alongside King Kong. No point in introducing him really, anyone who's anyone at least knows what a Godzilla is, with the suffix "zilla" being commonly used to denote when something is either monstrous or just bigger than it's supposed to be. Godzilla has over 50 crossovers across his long history to go over, so this might take a bit even if not all of them are relevant. Now we do have a few rules that need to be established for how we are going to be determining a win or a loss before we get into this. Rule 1. It does not necessarily have to be a fight. If it's a competition like a sports game or a board game, it will still count. Rule 2. If the subject of the episode, which in this case is Godzilla, is unfairly ganged up on, especially to the point of requiring help from creatures from his own franchise to beat him, it will not be counted as a fair Godzilla loss, as too many extenuating circumstances have to be contrived for him to lose. Rule 3. If the subject is explicitly weakened in the plot, then it won't count. Losses of this kind or the kind described in Rule 2 will be considered technical losses that do not factor into the final tally. Rule 4. At the same time, if Godzilla required an excess amount of help or contrivance for his own win, then those will be considered technical victories. They will not factor into the final tally either. That way it's fair all around. Rule 5. Every win or loss present in a single piece of media will count individually to the tally. If the subject wins twice, loses twice, or wins once and loses once, then each of those fights will count to the list, even if those all occurred at different points within one movie or show. Rule 6. Draws will be counted, but they will not affect the win-loss record as you may expect. Rule 7. We'll add this thing called the friendship count, to measure how many crossovers ended with some manner of friendship between the characters. This isn't really important, I just think it's funny. Also, this is not a comprehensive list of every single crossover, so don't expect Hello Kitty Godzilla on here. Stuff like this will not count, as it's just them being best friends and it's just adorable. And for Godzilla in particular, a special rule needs to be made. Characters like Mothra and Baragon are not inherently Godzilla kaiju. However, we will only be counting his first encounter with any of them for the list, as those would be when it was actually a crossover and before they were homogenized into the wider Godzilla brand. Baragon was not meant to be a Godzilla kaiju, but since Destroy All Monsters he had become an established member of the cast. As such, we will not be counting his loss to Godzilla in GMK as a crossover victory, as he had long been fused into the franchise by then. This will also count for the likes of Rodan and Gorosaurus, but not King Kong as he has never been a Godzilla kaiju. And one last thing, Godzilla has been in a lot, and I do mean a lot, of gacha and mobile games, but not all of those have stories or are even easy to get information for online. The difficulty comes into the fact that not only are half these gacha games not available in the West, but also even if they were, those events aren't available anymore. And even if they were watchable online, I can't read Japanese, but none of those are the case. A lot of these there is no information for them I could find online, which might just be because I'm using English sources, which, hey, it is what it is. I will quickly speed round some. First we have the ones where, to my knowledge, he's just a boss. We can't count these as wins or losses, because just as you can beat him as much as you want, he can also beat you as much as he wants. So it doesn't really work without a proper story, he's just a boss. Please let me know if I get any of these wrong. I've not played these games as I've said, and sources for them, yeah. We have Kairi Sen Million Arthur, Ace Combat, Shin Arima, PUBG, Clash of Kings, seemingly Dragon Quest of the Stars, World of Warships, Life After, Tower of Saviors, Battle Cats, and Envoy the King's Return. His boss in Revenge of Shinobi also counts as that, plus it's not officially licensed. It was just because a guy drew Godzilla as a reference to what the boss should emulate, and someone goofed and made it outright Godzilla. On the other hand, we now have those that I could find no information on at all, which are Monster Strike, Pokéron Dungeons, Skylock, Sengoku no Tora Z, Fishing Star, Quiz RPG World of Mystic Wiz, 47 Heroines, though I did find something that suggested the story was just Godzilla's hypnotized, they free him and he helps out, Vivid Army, Mega Magic Domain, Go Big, Boku and Dragons, and XD World. What I do know though is I can add the following to the friendship counter at the end. Monster Strike, 47 Heroines, Battle Cats, World of Warships, Clash of Kings, Go Big, and Envoy the King's Return, as he is playable or can be aided by the player. But now we can finally move on to the sponsor of today's video, G Fuel. Do not skip, I will bore you. The footage here will be foreshadowing some of the crossovers you'll get to see me talk about later. That's G as in Godzilla? Sure. Your all-in-one plant-based energy formula here to help you power up so you can push through the long nights of research to make videos like this, cause you totally do that, right? Right. G Fuel ain't got no sugar, no calories, no carbs, and me being on a diet right now trying to lose weight, it's great to have a tasty energy booster that doesn't come at the risk of compromising that diet. With over 50 flavors, my favorite probably being the new remastered watermelon mint I've talked about before, it's available in tubs or cans, and it's fantastic. It also does contain caffeine, so you should make sure you only drink it responsibly and not if you're under the age of 18. But if you're good with both those criteria, then head to the link in the description and use code BLOODRIGHT for 20% off your order. And while you're at it, they've currently got a BOGO going on. What's a BOGO? Well, obviously that's a buy one get one free. Duh! That means you buy one, and then you also get one free. Woo! Okay, now we can go on to the video. Godzilla's first ever crossover and third ever film was against King Kong, the big monster from the 1933 classic of the same name. In the 1962 film King Kong vs. Godzilla, originally intended to be King Kong vs. Frankenstein, but that didn't end up happening, Godzilla is awakened from the iceberg that had been trapping him since 1955's Godzilla raids again. On the distant Faroe Island, the giant monster King Kong is discovered and promptly roofied with some goofy berry juice and transported to Japan. Godzilla and Kong have two encounters in this film. The first does not go well for the big monkey. He throws a few rocks, but a couple blasts from Godzilla's atomic breath leaves him running with his non-existent tail between his legs, giving Godzilla his first win. The second fight he fares better. While he gets ratioed initially, a stray bolt of lightning energizes Kong enough for him to keep on battling, tumbling off a cliff alongside Godzilla and arising the victor. Now there are a lot of misconceptions and straight up lies about this ending, like that in the Japanese version Godzilla wins. But really all that is different is that his roar is also played at the end when Kong is the only one to rise out of the water still. There's people who claim the original intention was that it was a draw, but this is not the case. This is only a retroactive claim made by the producer after it was already established that Kong won. I don't really want to use the claim because it's clear the intention of the film from all we know and can tell was that Kong won the final battle, and never has anything suggested that Godzilla won. I don't want to just be biased in Godzilla's favor and go, oh yeah, Godzilla absolutely drawed here, when the movie was not meant to be a draw until years after its release. So I'm giving this second battle the status of loss for Godzilla, and not a technical one, because while the lightning bolt was a little bit bullshit, it's not really outside assistance or Godzilla being weakened. It's just a situational power this version of King Kong has that allowed him to win. Godzilla would return 2 years later in his fourth film, Mothra vs. Godzilla, with his franchise now reinvigorated from the success of his crossover with Kong, to battle Toho's other big monster Mothra from the 1961 film Mothra, an adaptation of the earlier released 1961 novel The Luminous Fairies and Mothra. Future battles against Mothra present in Ebirah Horror of the Deep, Godzilla vs. Mothra, GMK, and Godzilla Tokyo SOS will not be counted, as these are made after Mothra had already become a member of the overall Godzilla cast. Much as it happens with Mothra, her egg is stolen, and much like the Angry Birds clearly inspired off of her, she has to deal with this. Except by the time she actually gets up, Godzilla's already arrived. Now this is a hard one to discuss because, again, two fights happen, but they're not fair. The first battle, Godzilla wins, but it's against a weak Mothra who's basically on her deathbed as described by the Shobijin. So giving Mothra was far from even close to her best, this one has to be considered only a technical win. But the next battle is only a technical loss. Godzilla fights the two Mothra larvae, but this is right after fighting the JSDF all day and Mothra, and there were two Mothras instead of one. So that's a lot of nonsense for him to lose, and a bit of convenience for him to win. Later films would absolutely establish Godzilla's ability to clean Mothra up, but here they both get a technical win and loss. Later that same year, Godzilla would appear in his next film, Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster. And no, don't worry, I'm not about to reveal that Ghidorah actually originates in some obscure non-Godzilla media. It's actually his fight with Rodan that matters. Rodan originates from the 1956 film Rodan, and it's not clear whether or not this Rodan is one of the two from that movie having survived or different. Either way, we first see Rodan and Godzilla in this movie when they're throwing straight hands for hours. Unfortunately, this is not resolved, and the two would not actually have a proper fight with a conclusion on screen until Godzilla Final Wars 40 years later, when Rodan learned just how lucky he is to be Godzilla's friend most of the time. So just a draw here, but Rodan is our first addition to the friendship counter. Mothra also has become his friend now, so that's 2. Destroy All Monsters comes next, the 1968 film that acts as the last entry in the Showa era overall in terms of the timeline. This brought in Manda from the 1963 Atragon, Varan from the 1958 Varan the Unbelievable, Gorosaurus from the 1967 King Kong Escapes, and Baragon from the 1965 Frankenstein vs. Baragon. However, outside of a deleted scene where Godzilla thrashes Manda, they never actually fight. I'm just mentioning their debut in Godzilla Media here. I'm not sure how to count as well, but Maser cannons from War of the Gargantuars begin their Godzilla losing streak in this movie. So anyway, then in 1969 we got Marv Newland's Godzilla Meets Bambi, which does count as official because it did play before the 1985 Godzilla film. The unofficial sequels and remakes will not though. Godzilla steps on Bambi and Bambi dies. The end. We move on to 1970 with the stage play of Godzilla vs. Gamera, introducing Godzilla to the Katakawa Daiei icon Gamera from the 1965 film Gamera. Unfortunately, we know very little about this stage show, aside from a few clips. We see here Godzilla thrashing Gorosaurus, which I'll add as a technical win because it's debatable how much of a Godzilla kaiju Gorosaurus was at this point, but we also see Godzilla seemingly scaring off Space Gauss, which I'm willing to accept as a win for Godzilla because like what else is happening here? We transition from that to the 1977 Marvel Comics run, wherein Godzilla as early as the first issue is kicking ass. He encounters Marvel characters Nick Fury and Dum Dum Dugan, both debuting in 1963's Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos issue 1. He smokes both, and that's when they also had help from S.H.I.E.L.D. and Tony Stark's tech. So that's another win, and since they acted as one unit, I'll count it as one win. In the second issue, S.H.I.E.L.D. are forced to lure Godzilla out where they push him off a cliff and then he decides to leave. This would be a win, but the character Takiguchi states that Godzilla only left because he didn't intend to actually harm them. Meaning if he wanted to, he would have just gotten back up and slapped them all, so it's not even a technical win because Godzilla wasn't trying. In the third issue, Godzilla comes into contact with the champions, Iceman, Angel, Hercules, and Black Widow? Well, in this comic, he takes out Angel in one shot, and that counts as a win because, like, I mean, the guy's just down. But you can't really say anyone won the confrontation overall. S.H.I.E.L.D. and the champions kinda take each other out and Godzilla gets bored and leaves. Issue 4 and 5 see Godzilla fight original monster Batragon and original villain Dr. Demonicus, as well as later Gilardon, Lepirax, and Centaur, more original creatures that I won't count as wins for Godzilla. Issue 6 gives us a technical loss for Godzilla. While S.H.I.E.L.D. do manage to take him down, they attack him while he's sleeping. He doesn't really get a chance to fight back. The following two issues would focus on Godzilla rampaging through S.H.I.E.L.D. until the new Red Ronin shows up and promptly does try to fight Godzilla. Godzilla was absolutely going to win, but I'll consider this one another 0 outcome because they don't really finish the fight. Issue 9, Godzilla goes to Vegas, where he promptly gambles and leaves. Issue 10 introduces Yetragar, another original creature who fights Godzilla and Red Ronin for 2 issues. He'd then later fight the Beta Beast, another original creature, and issue 13 onward would follow Godzilla fighting more original monsters. But issue 14 does end with Dum Dum Dugan calling Godzilla his pal, adding another to our friendship count. We jump ahead to issue 18 with another technical loss. S.H.I.E.L.D. again has to attack Godzilla in his sleep to shrink him down and capture him, hoping to give him a home where he can live in peace. That's nice. Godzilla then fights Rat. Come issue 19, a severely weakened Godzilla manages to beat Dum Dum Dugan and Gabe Jones at the same time, netting him another win. Just a reminder, it would only be technical if Godzilla was buffed or Dum Dum Dugan and Jones were weakened. If Godzilla is weakened but still wins, that counts as a win as it's more impressive. Issue 20 and 21 see the still severely weakened Godzilla nearly beat the Fantastic Four, but they do manage to barely eke out a win, which counts as a technical loss for Godzilla as he was greatly weakened before the battle even began. He then fights Devil Dinosaur and is doing pretty well, but they end up stopping and becoming friends by issue 22, adding another buddy. At the end we get issues 23 and 24, seeing him fight the Avengers and Fantastic Four at full power, where he promptly slaps the shit out of the Human Torch, but frankly this all sort of ekes out into a draw, with Godzilla stalemating Thor, Iron Man, Captain America, Ant-Man, Wasp, Vision, and the Fantastic Four at the same time. We now head to this weird thing. A skit show where the companies behind Ultraman and Godzilla allowed them to briefly fight. Don't you dare bring up the time Ultraman beat up a guy based on Godzilla's costume, that's not Godzilla, you fucking morons. Rather, the two have a full-on brawl for 2 minutes, with the two ending up as friends instead playing a game of shogi, or trying to. I don't know what show this even is, I couldn't find any details, please let me know if you have any information, but it's a draw and another friend. We hop into 1988 and, well, this is interesting. So Insane Comic is a Dark Horse comic featuring Godzilla. While he isn't called by name, he is referred to as the King of the Monsters, and Dark Horse did have the license, and their official website does advertise this as a Godzilla comic. They would also later get the license for Gamera, meaning that retroactively, this is an official crossover between Godzilla and Gamera, and in it, Godzilla blasts him and wins in one shot, so I guess that counts. Moving back to Japan, we get the 1988 NES game Godzilla Monster of Monsters. In this game, Godzilla basically kicks the living crap out of a bunch of kaiju and machines from unrelated movies, and that's ignoring Baragon and Varan, even though I should probably count them. In this game, Godzilla kicks the crap out of Gizora, the giant squid from 1970's Space Amoeba, Mogira, the alien robot from 1957's The Mysterians, and he was far from becoming a Godzilla mecha at this point, Dagora, the mutant space cell from 1964's Dagora, the Goten, a spaceship from 1977's The War in Space, the Gotengo, a multi-purpose warship from 1963's Atragon, multiple Marker-like cannons, which will count as just one victory from 1957's The Mysterians, the Matango, mutant mushrooms from 1963's Matango, and the Natara UFO, spacecraft from 1959's Battle in Outer Space. That's 8 individual victories in one game, and these all do count because these are all entities from unrelated movies, only 2 of which, the Gotengo and Mogura, would go on to become proper Godzilla features afterwards. Battle Soccer Champion of the Field is a 1992 game in the Compati Hero series, specifically the sports game spin-offs. Released in the Super Famicom, it doesn't really have a story to really gauge how well Godzilla does, but it does feature him crossing over with the Ultra, Gundam, and Kamen Rider franchises. Though, the commercial does show Godzilla's team, with these fellas taking out a team of King Ghidorah, Azaku, Zeton, Eleking, King Joe, and some Kamen Rider goons. I count that as one victory overall, even if one of the enemies was one of his own kaiju, because Godzilla's team beat a team made of mostly crossovers, and it was a fair fight, as it was a team-on-team battle. This should add a ton to the friendship meter though, namely Godzilla's fellow heroes Ultraman Tyro, Ultraman Great, Ultra 7, Ultraman Ace, Ultraman ZZ Gundam, Gundam F91, Gundam MK3, Hyakushiki, Shiki, Gundam, Kamen Rider Stronger, Kamen Rider Black XR, Kamen Rider V3, and Kamen Rider Ichigo. Okay, so now we have the silly little Nike commercial from 1992, Godzilla vs. Charles Barkley. Everyone knows this one, featuring Charles Barkley from Real Life's 1963. He beats Godzilla in a one-on-one game of basketball, giving Godzilla another L after so long. Also, another friendship. The following year, Dark Horse will put out a comic of this storyline. This one, however, ends inconclusively. Not only is Barkley unfairly given an advantage by growing giant, which unlike the commercial is not his natural state of being for some reason, but Godzilla does a lot better in the game despite having no training and also destroys the ball. Barkley chides him and they become friends without either winning. So I guess Barkley does get to be his friend twice over in different stories then. Also, the same year we got Battle Baseball, another Compati Hero sports game. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any official commercials for this game, and it doesn't have a story, so I included only in case someone can find me anything of the such. However, Compati Heroes also put out the Great Battle 3 manga in 1993 too, which actually begins with Battle Baseball before heading into the game it's actually based on. And Godzilla is present. Here he soundly beats Zeton. That's the best I can give because the game doesn't finish, but he did slam Zeton for a home run, so I'll count it, partially because it's really funny. 2 years later we got Godzilla vs. Hero Zero, a Dark Horse superhero from 1993's Hero Zero Issue 0. This comic has like no scans online and I didn't have time to get it shipped over, but everything I can find tells me that Hero Zero basically fights Godzilla, drags him out of the sea, and then immediately runs out of power, and is lucky that Godzilla decides to just leave instead of keep going. His real luck though is that I'm willing to put this into a draw. 1 year later, Japan would have the 1996 Hero Festival, featuring Godzilla, Ultraman, Kamen Rider, Super Sentai, and Gamera. Unfortunately, what footage we have is very sparse. Not as sparse as the 1970s show, but still not great. We have footage of Godzilla's arrival, but he only fights Space Godzilla. We have Ultraman fighting Gigan, and this truly epic footage of Godzilla teaming up with Ultraman, proving their friendship again. They do fight at one point though, based on this commercial. While we can assume that he, Ultraman, and the others combined get a win against multiple foes, it's hard to say who, so we'll just acknowledge this is awesome as fuck and move on. Godzilla Trading Battle is a 1998 game with an insane cast of characters, and in this game's story mode, you basically go through and beat up everyone, with Godzilla as a character you're meant to be using all game. This is another monster of monsters situation, so let's go through it. Mothra Leo and Des Ghidorah from 1996's Rebirth of Mothra, Dagara from 1997's Rebirth of Mothra 2, Gyra and Sander from 1966's War of the Gargantuars, Camoebus and the Crab from 1970's Space Amoeba, and Maguma from 1962's Gorath. We now jump all the way to 2015 with Super Robot Wars X Omega, a video game that crosses over a ton of stuff. Now I know there's this prevailing narrative about Godzilla soloing half the cast in this game, but I did something crazy. I asked someone who actually knows what happened in the game what happened. Thanks to Epic Link Sam for helping out with this, I will link him in the description. So Godzilla in this game only has 2 battles. He fights and defeats Dr. Hell and Baron Ashura from Go Nagai's 1972 manga Mazinger Z, giving him 1 win. He then also defeats Mazinger Z with the Jet Scrambler, AV Units 0001 and 02, and 2 Mechagodzillas all at the same time. You can count that as 4 victories because you wouldn't count the Mechagodzillas, or just 1 super impressive victory. For the sake of this tally, I'll just count it as 1 super impressive victory. And after that, he doesn't do anything again. Originally, I had Battle Spirits next, but there's like no lore for Godzilla in that game to my knowledge, so now we move on to the hilarious Crayon Shin-chan. In episode 901 of the Crayon Shin-chan series, debuting in 1992 and adapted from the 1990s manga of the same name, Shin Godzilla actually showed up before the Shin Godzilla film. In this short segment, Godzilla shows up, kicks some ass, and then Shinnosuke Nahara gets a buff to grow giant and they shrink Godzilla and sit on him. It's really silly and honestly kind of unpleasant as Godzilla gets his mouth stuffed with a giant 5-year-old's ass. I'm tempted to count this as a Godzilla loss because it is really funny, but not only did Shinnosuke need an unfair advantage against Godzilla as well as outside help in the fight to beat him, but the narration afterwards states that Godzilla recovered anyway, so it's just a technical loss. So we skip over City shrouded in shadow because Godzilla never shows up alongside Ultraman or Gamera or anything, but I have to mention the game because everyone will comment about it if I don't. Anyway, in Scooby-Doo Team Up issue 43 from 2017, Hanna-Barbera's Godzilla appears in one panel, set to battle against Frankenstein Jr. alongside a bunch of other monsters, but we never see the fight, and when all the other monsters show up later, Godzilla is absent, so inconclusive? One of the few gacha games that gives a story to its Godzilla collab that I could find, Godzilla appears in the 2018 collaboration with Eternal Linkage. However, the story seems to amount to Godzilla shows up, they attack him for a bit, and then he gets bored and leaves. Either Shin or Phileas Godzilla show up and they just kind of like choose to leave, so inconclusive? The next one's weird. In 2018, for the release of Godzilla Planet Eater and the Mobile Suit Gundam narrative films, a promo was edited together by Toho to commemorate, using shots from the films to give off the impression that Godzilla Earth and the RX-9 narrative Gundam were throwing hands. But, it ends right as narrative Gundam charges up the cock cannon, so inconclusive. Following that, we get the Godzilla vs. Evangelion The Real 4D event, which apologies for the poor quality, but what the hell do you expect? There's no other way to watch this thing. Naturally, it crosses Godzilla over with the 1995 anime Neon Genesis Evangelion. In this event, Godzilla shows up, and despite this being Shin Godzilla, who has never been in a fight before, absolutely smokes 3 Eva units at once. However, their battle is cut short by the appearance of Shin Ghidorah, which is a name that sounds way better than Shin King Ghidorah. And then they kind of just work together to smoke his ass. Godzilla was absolutely winning, but you never know with this version's inability to perform without running out of stamina, so it's inconclusive. That same year, we also got the incredibly well-named Shinkansen Henkei Robo Shinkalion the movie The Marvelous Fast ALFAX. Snow Godzilla shows up 3 times in this film, however he doesn't really stay long enough to do much. He shows up, beats ass, doesn't elaborate, and leaves. In one shot, he knocks Miku, yes, that Miku, but this fight doesn't go any further, so I can't really say either one, even though Miku was definitely going to lose this. In the next battle, however, against Hayato and Hokuto, definitely I give it to Godzilla. They accomplish nothing, he blasts them to Kingdom Come, and the only reason they survive is because he vanishes. Then he appears again at the end and gets a technical victory against Valdor, but he only helped out, so it won't count as a proper victory. Again in 2019, Godzilla appeared in 2 different collaborations. The first was in the mobile game Symphogear XD, a game that debuted in 2017 and recently fucking died. In this story, which I could not read, Godzilla appears and wreaks havoc. From my observation and help in understanding shit from a lovely lady named B, thanks for helping, Godzilla is essentially like corrupted. He eats some aliens and that makes him go berserk. He does beat the crap out of Kanade and Maria, but he didn't like get to finish that fight, so I guess it's inconclusive. He takes out several Alkanoids, which, I mean, those kind of, yeah, those count, that counts as a win. But he's never really beaten himself, until the very end, which takes all the heroes using the power of Kaiju, one of which even using the power of Godzilla himself, alongside the help of Mechagodzilla and Mothra to actually take Godzilla down. That is way too much help to be considered a fair loss for Godzilla, so it counts as a technical loss. What I didn't need help for was his collaboration with Grand Summoners, which, hallelujah, is in English! In this collaboration with the 2016 mobile game, Godzilla Earth is summoned by accident by the character Nia, and he kinda just rummages around. It's made blatantly clear that the only thing anyone can do is annoy him enough that he decides to leave. It's even stated that he wasn't using his full power on them. He would have killed them all if he hadn't chosen not to. He does, however, take out Nia in one shot when she attempts to control him, so that's a win, and he helps everyone kick King Ghidorah's ass, giving him a friendship too. We now move on to Godzilla vs. Kong in 2021. Set up by the earlier films Kong Skull Island in 2017 and Godzilla King of the Monsters in 2019, this rematch of legends brought the two back for a second go at it. But this time, while I'm sure some people are going to end up a little upset about this, the first battle the two have decidedly goes the way of Godzilla. Even when Kong lands a full-on haymaker, Godzilla's bitch slap hits way harder. Kong is very much beaten unconscious in this fight, and while the environment did suit Godzilla, he was dominating when they were fighting on the carrier on land until the military helped Kong out. And Godzilla still won. Point to Godzilla. Point to Godzilla. Here's what might annoy people. To me, I do not consider the final battle in the film 2 fights. Cause here's the thing, when the character comments, "Looks like Kong wins round 2, Godzilla just gets back up next time we see him. Life isn't a fighting game, buckos, and neither are movies. It takes Godzilla all of a minute to get back up at best, and when he does, he's fine. Kong landed a solid hit, and full credit, he did well in this fight, but when Godzilla gets back up, he rolls him over. But this does kind of add to our friendship meter. They are cool with each other at the end. Plus, Kong gets the kill on Mechagodzilla, so he can't feel too bad. We move on to 2021's Godzilla battle line, and all of its crossovers with Evangelion, Ultraman, Kamen Rider, and Gamera. All of which sadly end up being the whole I can't count it if they're a boss. But this time, everyone else is a boss, so yeah. So as cool as it is, the most we can say is that Godzilla did fight with Ultraman and Gamera, but there was no conclusion to it we can confirm. We now move on to the long-awaited Godzilla vs. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers comic from 2022. And in the first issue, Godzilla ignores Rita's magic and absolutely thrashes the Dragon Zord in a few hits. That's a pretty outright victory, that one. In the second issue, the Megazord shows up to pick a fight, and really struggles, but their battle is left unfinished as the Zillions attack, leading to both retreating. In the third issue, Rita sicks out some guys against the Megazord, and Godzilla reappears and fights alongside it, taking on Gigan, Rhino Blaster, and Eye Guy. While the Power Rangers did help Godzilla, including healing his prior wounds, considering it was the Megazord at 70% and an injured Godzilla fighting 3 different monsters at once, I'd say that's a fair fight, if not unfair towards Godzilla's side, so I'll give them a point. Following that, Godzilla and the Megazord fight against Scorpina, aided by Kamakuros, Megagyrus, and Kumonga. They beat them, but Scorpina barely does anything and is taken out by her own guy, so I can't count it as a win because Godzilla mostly just beat up his own kaiju. Then the last few issues they team up to take down King Ghidorah, but Godzilla does attack the Rangers again, so no friendship. He does, however, in a single blast manage to force Rita to retreat, alongside taking down the ship and forcing Goldar and Scorpina to go with her. I'll be generous and say this doesn't count. This comic is going to get a sequel in the future though, so we'll see how much he gets there. We then get the extra exciting crossover with Call of Duty, and unlike the previous time this happened, Godzilla and Kong have a whole operation based on them in the game Call of Duty Warzone. While this is a thing and you can attack Godzilla, you actually don't really need to. Your goal is to gather intel, and that can help. So this is inconclusive at best, but I'm going to just say it almost doesn't count in general. I just wanted to mention it because I think a well-made tactical game where you play as the military, planning ahead defenses against various different kaiju could make for a really cool and fun game. Like what the NES sequel tried, but, you know, not shit. 2022, Godzilla, Gigan, Kiryu, and Destoroyah would be added to Gigabash, a video game which has no story for any of the DLC. While there are trailers for this, Godzilla only really beats up kaiju from his own series, so while he is here fighting Ultraman and Gigabash's own kaiju, there's not much to say for anything conclusive. That year, P-Godzilla vs. Evangelion G-Cell Awakening would cross Godzilla over with Evangelion to fight one last time, for now. And again, they end their fight early to take on King Ghidorah, but this time Godzilla turns Ava Unit 1 into a Godzilla Ava hybrid, so inconclusive. I put Ant's Underground Kingdom on here because I thought it'd be funny, but turns out they actually help Godzilla, so I can now say his friend list includes a bunch of ants. And moving into 2023, SD Shin Kamen Rider Rumble would feature Godzilla as DLC, but as far as I know, nothing comes of this story-wise, so we can ignore it. And now we move on to a yet unfinished crossover, because I'm hoping to get this out before Godzilla X Kong drops, so I don't have to wait even longer for it to show up in Australia, and then longer still to be able to get footage from it, just in case it contains more to go over. So because it'll be in April where the last issue of this comic drops, and if it's April by the time you're watching this, I will update in the pinned comment what happens in the crossover. So this comic is actually really good and well written, but you'll have to wait before I really talk about what I like about it, because, you know, that'll be a later video. Long story short, it's a shame that people only ever talk about Godzilla beating Superman, because this is probably my favorite of all Godzilla's crossovers, with really fun character writing and interactions, and Batman and Superman getting to be great friends. But, yeah, in the second issue, Godzilla and Superman have a little tussle, until Shazam does something stupid and Superman gets horribly injured protecting Shazam. I can't actually give Godzilla the point here, because Superman was stalemating him until he had to protect Billy, meaning it wasn't a fair victory. However, when Atom Smasher tries to take on Godzilla, Godzilla nearly kills him with a few hits, giving him another win. And then finally, in issue 5, Aquaman unleashes the Kraken on Godzilla. While we don't really see how this fight ends because it's a bit unclear, everything goes silent before Aquaman clamps the chains onto Godzilla, so we can assume that with the Kraken looking this shit that Godzilla probably beat it down, giving him one final win. Okay, let's also talk about this. You could argue some stuff for the Minecraft Bedrock DLC, but it's not really like you play as anyone from Minecraft. You take the role of characters from Shin Godzilla, for instance, but within the world of Minecraft. This sadly isn't Godzilla vs. Steve, it's Shin Godzilla, but it takes place in Minecraft, so I can't give any wins here. And that would be that. Of course, this is subject to change in the future. As of writing this, we have the upcoming crossover with Dave the Diver, the last few issues of Justice League vs. Godzilla vs. Kong, the sequel to the Godzilla vs. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers comic, and of course Godzilla vs. Kong: The New Empire. But as those ain't here yet, let's take a look at the tally. Over the course of crossovers with Godzilla spanning from 1962 to, as of this video, early March 2024, Godzilla has claimed 36 wins, 16 draws or inconclusive fights without endings, 2 losses, 3 technical wins that don't count, and 5 technical losses that don't count, giving him a total win-loss record of 95, which goes down to 84 if you count the technical wins and losses. Our total ranking system for this will go as such. S tier is for a record over 90%, A plus tier is for a record between 80 to 90, A tier is for 70 to 80, B tier is for 60 to 70, C tier for 50 to 60, D plus tier for 40 to 50, D tier for 30 to 40, F tier for 20 to 30, and Z tier for 10 to 20. Which I honestly don't know of any character we tackle will manage to hit, but I can think of a few that might. Godzilla firmly sits in the S tier, with a record of 95% across its character history. While I do have plans for future characters, let me know who you want to see me tackle in the future. As long as they have enough battles with conclusive victories, I'm willing to give them a look. Off the top of my head, I really want to tackle the Predator, Batman, Kratos, and Ryu, but you know, some of those guys have a lot more than others, so that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed.